Well, just first and foremost, I know we as a staff appreciate this opportunity. And speaking for myself, it is nice to see you guys. We see you in the preseason, we see you at other points in time, but to get the opportunity to, kind of give you a little bit of perspective on our end each and every week is something that we look forward to. I certainly do myself. And obviously, we're coming off of a very disappointing loss that took place Friday or Saturday night, excuse me, in East Lansing. And there's some things that we're working on, we're working through. And I think right now the big thing is just us moving forward and us looking at Northwestern and setting our sights on them. And our players have done that since they came in the building late Sunday afternoon, and it's still that way. And again, I apologize for keeping you guys waiting, but we were out on the field still with the team. And with that being said, I'll open it up for questions.
All right, first question, Coach, will be from Scott Docterman.
Seth, how you doing today? Thanks for doing this.
I'm good, Scott. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, wanted to ask you about kind of what happened Sunday and then into Monday. I'm sure you've got a motivated, experienced group of players who understood what they did wrong. The other day, you knew what they did wrong. What was the film session like? Because I'm sure that there was the fundamentals and things that were kind of an aberration that kind of broke down on Saturday night. And how did they take that to the field on Monday, trying to get better and learn from what they just did on Saturday night?
Of course, Scott. And Sunday wasn't a whole lot of fun. It is when you're winning, and when you're faced with a loss the previous night, it's not a lot of fun on Sunday. And I think the one thing that you just got to be careful of is trying to turn something into what it isn't. And certainly our tackling was not up to our standard, and very uncharacteristic, for us in general. And so that was a lot of the pointed teaching pieces and places that we needed to spend more time as we watched the tape. And then there's the other stuff that comes with any game, the schematic stuff. But this was a little bit more fundamental, when it came to what we were trying to illustrate. Our players saw it. It wasn't like anything that we haven't talked about or anything that they haven't done prior to. It's just a matter of the inconsistency there, and us being a little bit uncharacteristic in regards to what it was that showed up last Saturday night.
John Steppe.
Hi, Seth. I appreciate you taking the time. Hope you're doing well. I think it was 32 consecutive games where you kept opponents under 400 yards, and now two of the last three have been over 400. Kind of what gives you optimism that this is kind of a short-term kind of blip on the radar and not kind of a long-term kind of warning sign for this defense?
Yeah, John, I think it's you do have to be cautious. And there's plenty of stats out there, and the one that the streak that we had going under 400 yards is certainly something that's been publicized and gotten a lot of attention. And here we are 3 games beyond that, and we're we're in a situation where I think you got to remind yourself that we have played real good football defensively, and we have tackled well. And I'll deviate from this slightly just to talk about the tackling. It wasn't until it was brought to my attention yesterday, and from somebody that didn't watch our game, somebody that's in college football, somebody that coaches on a different staff, had sent me a screenshot, just randomly. And the screenshot was an illustration of where we were in regards to missed tackles, because their team was having struggles with missed tackles, and he didn't see what took place last Saturday night because they were actually playing at the same time. But in terms of our missed tackle percentage, we're sixth in the country in regarding missed tackle percentage, and that's done by PFF, which is what you guys have access to as well. And prior to the Michigan State game, we were actually number 1 in the country in terms of missed tackle percentage. So tying that into the 400 yards or the explosive plays, whatever stat we're talking about, we do have to remind ourselves, and we have to remind our players that, you know, we've played good football and we've played it consistently over a period of time, to include this year. We've tackled well. So we just, you know, we have to remind ourselves, you know, what we are currently and what we've been, and we've got to find a way to get back there. And I think that's more than anything, you know, regarding any of those stats, is, you know, just reminding the players that, you know, we've been there. How do we get back there? And that's the illustrations that show up on Sunday, you know, with the team that Scott had mentioned.
Tom Kakert.
Hey, Seth, maybe something a little more about future than present. But you had three really good freshman linebackers join you this year. We haven't seen them. I'm just curious how they're developing, and from your perspective, what have you seen from them?
Tom, it was no more than, you know, 5 or 10 minutes ago that I was watching those guys go through a live scrimmage during practice that, you know, that we do with the younger guys. And, you know, there's a lot of optimism there in regards to the depth at the linebacker position. And you're speaking at the very bottom of the depth chart, you know, being the guys that had just come in, and then there's the guys that are in between. Then there's the guys that you guys are seeing spread across our special teams units that, you know, had Jay and Nick decided to leave, they would be the ones that would be, you know, carrying the heavy load right now. But, you know, I think in regards to the entire group, I'm optimistic. I am excited about this group. I'm excited about the future of the group. They're certainly fortunate right now that they get a chance to, you know, see it illustrated on a daily basis, just what is required to be a real good Big Ten linebacker, and a good linebacker, you know, across the country. So what they're witnessing right now, I think, is adding to, you know, what I believe will be an exciting future at that position, because they've got some guys in front of them that are operating at a very high level.
Corey Breda.
Morning, Coach. Sounds like you're not too concerned about the tackling based on the 1 week, but I'm just curious, how do you react moderately to what we saw Saturday? Have you guys taken any different approach to like certain drills? Have you instituted anything different at this point, or is it more of a, like, kind of what John said earlier, kind of a blip on the radar?
Yeah, I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't say that I'm not worried about it. And if I did come across that way, please trust me, it's not. I certainly don't want that the way to be it. You know, this to be described, because, you know, when something pops up like that and it happens, you know, during the course of an entire game, you know, there is reason to be cautious of it, and there's reason to start looking at alternative ways or tweaks that you can, you know, that you can implement within your, you know, within your tackling system. We do a tackling circuit each and every day. You know, so there's been some minor tweaks that, you know, but a lot of it is on the tape. A lot of it is on the tape. A lot of it, a lot of it comes back to pursuit angles. A lot of it comes back to vertical and horizontal displacement within the defense, which, credit to Michigan State, they did a really good job of, you know, stretching the field horizontally, whether that was with the quarterback, whether that was with the outside runs. And then once that happens, if you get vertically displaced defensively, meaning that you get two guys on different levels, you know, then there's cutback seams and things of that nature that that force the issue. And so, Corey, we're focused on it. We're you know, we're trying to, you know, again, continue to make it a focal point with our players. You know, but you're just not going to make a wholesale change and go to a different style of tackling or anything like that. It's more just the minor tweaks, the points of emphasis that you're trying to make on the practice tape in regards to whether it be the fundamentals, the pursuit angles, the collectiveness in terms of vertical and horizontal displacement.
Adam Jacoby.
Excuse me, Seth, thank you so much for the time this morning. So one of the things that we heard from Jay after the game was that he didn't believe that he had played well enough and wasn't putting his teammates in good enough position to succeed. Is that, would you agree with that assessment from him? And I guess, what did you want to see different?
Well, Adam, I would agree with him, because I'm not, you know, I would agree with him because those are his words, and that's his emotion. That's how he felt shortly after the game. And I think, you know, going back and looking at the tape, you know, I think I think there's indicators of where the play could have been better. I think there's indicators of where the play was pretty good on his part. But, Jay's at this point in his career where I think he's putting a lot from an emotional standpoint on his own shoulders. And I think that's probably what you heard a lot of. But, I think there's many guys, those that didn't get a chance to talk to you guys on Saturday evening that probably would have said the same thing. A lot of the guys in the room probably felt that way. And that's, that's where it should be. Those words are real. Those words that came from Jay are, he's speaking to a standard. He's speaking to a standard of play, speaking to a standard of, what we're working for in terms of the result. And then he's certainly speaking to a standard in which, we measure tackling. And, I think that's probably what you got from him. And I think it's what you would have gotten from a lot of our other guys that were on that field on Saturday night.
Thanks.
Chad Leistico.
Seth, good to have you here. So your scoring defense is the worst, on pace to be the worst since 2017. Total defense worst since 2017. Passing defense is on pace to be the worst since 2010. So I'm just curious, since you've been here since at least 17, what is different about this? What do you see that's different about this defense that maybe those defenses did have?
Yeah, I think, the result there is I think probably a combination of a lot of things. And, I do appreciate you throwing out, where we're at, because I've tried to make sure that I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that from a statistical standpoint, because, and it's not that you don't know. You're pretty sure, where you're at when it comes to defensive play, especially at this point in the season. But, there's been big plays. There's been, situational stuff that we have not, we haven't executed up to our standard. And so the execution, much like the tackling, a lot of that stuff has to increase. It's got to get better. And, it's certainly, things that we are focused on. And, and then credit some of our opponents too. Like, I don't want to put it all, I don't want to put it all in one area. We've played some good teams. We've played some teams that have posed some issues for us. And it's on our end, in the last 5 games here to make sure that we correct what has been hurting us, pay attention to what our deficiencies are, be hyper aware of it, and then, keep trying to put a plan together to move forward based on who we are as a team right now and what it is that has given us troubles.
David Eichholt.
Hey, Seth, always appreciate the time, so thank you for it. I asked Kirk yesterday and a couple of your players about if it's a skill to be able to be brutally honest when you're evaluating tape. I know you have a lot of leadership in your linebacker room and a lot of experienced guys, but would you agree with that assessment that's a skill? And can you kind of talk through the process of a player really learning how to be self-aware? Is it a culture thing? Is it being coached into it? Do they have when they get to campus? I'm just kind of curious about your insight.
Yeah, I think, maturity also, in my opinion, plays a huge role in being self-aware. And, experience certainly plays a huge role in being self-aware. And, I think it's something that's grown. I think it's something that you're matured into. You certainly need, plenty of opportunities to be humbled, before you start being hyper aware of yourself and, and us collectively as a defense. But, I have some guys in my room that right now, and to include, guys that aren't Jay Higgins or Nick Jackson, that I also believe are self-aware on a very high level and can be told some things, be shown some things where, it does get pretty personal. It does get pinpointed. But I think the whole self-awareness thing, it comes with time. It comes with experience. It comes with being humbled, whether it be in practice or in games. And then I think that has grown from there. I mean, there were some examples of that the other night where we had some young guys that, my guess is their self-awareness because of, some things that took place on Saturday night, their self-awareness will grow because of that, because there were some issues or deficiencies that, will mature somebody to become a little bit more self-aware of themselves. And then, obviously us as a defense as a whole.
Tyler Tashman.
Hey Seth, I hope you're doing well. As I understand it, you were part of part of recruiting Jamari Harris. I know it's been a little while since that whole process. But what all do you just remember about that and trying to get him to Iowa?
Yeah, Jamari came from Montini Catholic, which we've recruited the school, for years, and I have for the time that I've had the area of Chicago, so for the past 8 years or so. And Jamari was a young man that, at the time it was late in the process, and Jamari had some FCS offers. And I had a chance to go into the school. Coach Bukowski, who's still at the school as a head coach, is a good friend of mine, and somebody that we trust, somebody that's been there for a long period of time, so we know what we're getting when it comes to his players. And he and I had spoken about Jamari. I think Jamari had just maybe returned from North Dakota State. I was actually in the gymnasium that day with David Braun. David was there, hoping that that Jamari would stick to his decision to go to North Dakota State, or at least they were the front runner at the time. And the two of us sat there and watched basketball practice. And the one thing that stood out to me with Jamari was he was the first one in, he was the first one out. And when I say the first one in, he beat everybody else in there by probably 30 minutes and had his own routine. It seemed like it was, it wasn't something that was orchestrated that day. Like he was, he had a 30-minute routine where he was going through all of his stuff that he had and that he wanted to do. And, just sat there and watched it, and then, had the opportunity to speak with him further. And, that's kind of how it all happened. It wasn't like we were fighting against a bunch of other teams, on our level. We were just looking for a guy that had some length, guy that was coming from a good school, guy that had been coached hard, guy that had a chip on his shoulder. And, we got plenty of those stories, and Jamari's a great example of it. And from the second that he's been here, he's certainly mature beyond his years. And, I'm sure you guys can attest to that just in your conversations with him. But, he's grown since he's been here. He's stuck with it. He's matured. He's developed. And, I think right now we're seeing, a lot of what, much like Jay Higgins, much of what Jamari's put into this, and now he's getting out of it.
All right, final three questions, Seth. John Steppies first.
You were mentioning earlier the guys who would be starting if Jay, Nick, and Kyler left and didn't come back. Kind of what have you seen from them lately in terms of their development, and how ready are they if kind of for whatever reason they needed to step in, kind of in game?
Yeah, I would say on my end that I would say that they're ready. You certainly don't know until you actually have to go in there, and the situations, the situation they're being faced with is much different than going in at the end of the game versus Washington or something like that. Like if they had to go in there, then you'd find out pretty quick, how ready they are. But the body of work that I have to go off of is what we see in practice. And their investment in practice, their investment in the meetings, their investment in all that is asked of them, outside of this building in terms of their opponent prep has given me the confidence that if that time came, that that they would all be ready for the challenge. And then you'd end up looking at it the following day and figure out exactly how ready they were, and you'd go from there. But everything they've done up to this point, John, has led me to believe, that they would welcome that challenge. They certainly, it's not like they get to sit on the sideline and ponder about that, because they're in there on all of our special teams units, and they're scattered throughout it. So, they've got a lot going on their plate when it comes to game day, outside of defensive football. But everything that I see Monday or Sunday through Friday has given me the confidence that they can go out there and perform.
Scott.
No, a couple of years ago, you seemed to be kind of excited when you were able to give Jay an opportunity to kind of take the reins in the spring when Jack and Seth were out with injuries, and he kind of filled that leadership vacuum that you were looking for. And then, of course, he seems to have done that since then, immensely. What is it about him that makes him tick mentally, that puts him in those positions to not only lead but also to execute on the field?
Yeah, I would start by, just giving, the majority of the credit to Jay Higgins and the person that he is, because he's grown into, by his own choice, he's grown into what it is that we're witnessing right now. And what I get the opportunity to be around, each and every day. And that hasn't been easy. And, that video that they put out, a couple weeks ago where it kind of illustrated and spoke to, Jay in regards to the process, like it hasn't been easy. The recruiting process wasn't easy based on what he wanted, what he was hopeful for. And then when he got here, it certainly was not easy. Came here in 2020, had to sit behind, Jack Campbell and Seth Benson and others. And, he waited his time. So I think a lot of the credit goes to him. He's certainly listened to a lot of voices and paid a lot of attention and, turned himself into, a really good college football player at this point. And somebody that continues to stay motivated, whether it be office time that he's coming in, whether it be questions that he's asking during, he is not to the point where he feels like he's got it figured out. And that's, that's on him. That's on him. That's on the time that he's spending, just making sure that, each and every day he's coming into this building saying, okay, I can get better today in some regard. And I think that exists in the weight room. I think that exists in the meeting room, certainly exists on the practice field as well. And then, to speak to his leadership, I just, I can't say enough about it. I really can't. And, I think he does a hell of a job leading this team. I think he does a hell of a job leading the linebacker room. And, my guess is when he gets the opportunity to do whatever he's going to do post college football career, he's going to, he's going to make some people pretty happy in whatever regard, whatever work capacity, because he's a leader and he has no problem standing out in front of the crowd and saying, hey, follow me.
All right, final question, Seth, will be from Chad.
We haven't talked about number 2 cornerback yet. Revolving door there, obviously, while you're smiling. What do we, what your practices are over. Like, do you know who's going to start this week? What kind of process have you gone through this week to figure that out? And is Jalen Watson your number 5 option at this point? Is he possibly in the mix?
I would say Jalen Watson very much so is in the mix, Chad. And I couldn't tell you at this point in time, who's going to line up. You said the number 2. I couldn't tell you, at this point in time, what that picture is going to look like on Saturday. And that's not to deflect the question. There are options. And, there's a case of guys that are banged up. There's a case of guys that, show up during practice or, do something during practice that catches your eye. There's also the case of, what are we trying to do in the back end from a coverage standpoint? Because the skill set in regards to one player might pose a better option when it comes to man-to-man coverage or third down package stuff versus, the guy that we need to be, that we need to have in there on first and second down. And, with the team that we're faced with this week, they're a big 11 personnel and 12 personnel team. And there's a unique difference between what they do out of 11 personnel and what they do out of 12 personnel. 12 personnel obviously will be in 40 defense, a good bit of the time. 11 personnel will be in cash. And, so it's, I think it's healthy, Chad. You might sit there and question, how healthy it is on a Saturday based on, the play or the result. But, there's guys in there that are competing right now. There's guys in there that have done some really good things. And, I think that's added for, competition. And, again, there's the next man in stuff that's taken place where we've had guys that have been banged up and we've gotten guys out there to get reps. And, so I think the room's growing. I think, I think it's just a deal from a week to week. Who's going to be that other corner that we put out there? Who's going to go in on third down? Who's going to be the third cover guy that we put in on third down?
All right. Thank you for your time this